This is the stem on your bike. It connects the handlebars with the steerer tube and is probably the single most important component when it comes to adjusting the fit and the handling of your bike. Now, some people might want to change their stem because their existing one is damaged, or maybe they want to upgrade it to a lighter, more fancy stem. But most often it's just because they want to adjust the way that their bike fits them. Now, this is a really easy maintenance job that you can do at home, and I'm going to show you how to do it with basic tools. But there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of so that you can do it safely and not damage anything. The only tools that you need for this job are either Allen keys or Torx keys, depending on the type of bolts that you have on your stem, and then a torque wrench so that you can tighten up the bolts to the correct torque when you've fitted the stem. The first thing you want to do is to take your bike out of a stand and have it on the ground and just check the status of your headset bearings, as it's a good idea to replace them when you're doing this kind of thing, and it's just good practice to check them. So to do that, turn the front wheel from side to side and just feel and see if it's gravelly or if there's any resistance in there. After that, the first step is to remove the handlebars. So to do that, I'm going to put the bike back in the stand. To remove the faceplate on your stem, take either your Torx key or your Allen key, it's an Allen key in my case, 4mm, and work each one of the bolts slightly at a time. It's a good idea not to just fully undo one bolt and then do the next bolt. Just do a little bit on each one at a time. This is because by taking out one bolt, you then put a lot of pressure on the other bolts, and in some cases, it can cause bolts to fail and snap and damage your stem. We don't want that. With the faceplate and the bolts removed, put that somewhere safe. You don't want to lose any of those bolts. The next step is to remove the top cap on the steerer tube. Now, to do this, I'm now going to take the bike out of the stand and put it on the ground. This will stop the fork falling out when I start undoing these bolts. Another thing that you can do is to secure the fork. There's a number of ways you can do this. You can put something that straps around the fork and onto the frame and holds it in place. An old inner tube is a good sort of hack you can use. And another hack that can be quite useful is you can use a static indoor trainer, fix your rear wheel to that on the ground, and then it's sort of like a ground mounted work stand. But I'm just going to hold it on the ground, which is the most common way people do it. First, remove the stem top cap. And next, undo the stem bolts here. With the stem bolts undone, we can now wiggle the stem up and off the steerer tube. Take note of the spacers that are underneath it. At this point in the process, if you did find earlier that your headset bearings were loose or worn, then this is the time to give them some love, either change them or reseat them. But that's a topic for another video. Now, when fitting your new stem to the bike, one thing you shouldn't do is put any grease on the steerer tube or the stem. You don't need to grease this component, and actually putting some grease on there could cause it to slip, which we definitely don't want to happen. One thing you might want to consider putting on there though is some carbon assembly compound if the stem that you're putting on there is carbon and the steerer tube is carbon also, as that will do the complete opposite of grease. It will help keep it locked and stiff in place. You sometimes find that you get a build-up of salt residue and grime in between your steerer and your old stem, and it's not going to do your new stem and your steerer any good at all. So it's a good idea and a good opportunity to remove it and give it a clean before you put your new stem on. To fit your new stem, or in my case, the stem I've just taken off, but you get the idea. Make sure that the bolts on your new stem are loose enough so that it can slide freely onto the steerer tube, and also be sure to put any spacers that you require on first underneath the stem. Place any spacers on top of the stem that you need, and then put the top cap back in place and install the bolt. This only needs to be finger tight at this point. We'll come back to it later. The next step is to reinstall the handlebars and the stem faceplate. It's a good idea to put some anti-seize thread compound on the threads of the stem bolts if they don't have any on. This stops them sticking if you want to remove your handlebars later on. These bolts though, they already have some on there, so I don't need to do that. With the faceplate loosely in place, I'm now going to go around with the torque wrench and torque up each of the bolts gradually, incrementally, to the correct desired torque. Now this varies from stem to stem. It's typically in the range of around 5 to 6 Newton meters, but check with your specific one. It's usually written on in some tiny writing. Adjusting the headset. It's important to adjust the headset's compression before tightening the stem bolts. If your headset is loose and has play in it, this can affect your bike's handling and also damage your fork. Tighten the bolt finger tight and then add perhaps a quarter turn with an Allen key to start with. See where this gets you. If when you hold the front brake on and rock the bike back and forth, you can feel knocking in the head tube, the headset isn't tight enough. If you lift the front of the bike up and move the bars from left to right and the steering feels tight or restricted, then you've gone too tight and you need to back the bolt off a bit. Now before I do up the stem bolts on the steerer, I'm just now checking that everything's in line and my bars aren't wonky, and make some slight adjustments if they are. That's looking good. So with that in place, I'm now going to do up the stem bolts. Just doing them lightly with the Allen key first, and then I'm going to switch to the torque wrench. Something else that you should consider is if you're changing your stem quite significantly, such as from a small one like this, an 80mm one, up to something, well, a lot bigger, maybe a 130 or a 140 stem, or if you're changing the position of the stem significantly on the steerer tube, going from quite high up to maybe slammed, then this can have implications for the cables and their positioning and how long they need to be. A longer stem might require that you need to change your cables and make them longer. Conversely, if you're going to a much shorter stem, the cables might now be too long. But if you're changing just something in the realms of 1 or 2 centimeters, you can usually get away with it. I really hope that you found this video useful and it helps you change your stem. And if you have, then please give us a like and a follow. Comment with any questions you've got down below, and also let us know what maintenance jobs you'd like to see us tackle in the future so that we can help you.